Hey, thank you very much, guys. We all love the State Fair. We all know how wonderful it can be to get out there and have not only a pork chop on a stick and see some fried corn, but to really dive in with a lot of these top-level leaders who spent a career literally on the front line defending our country. I was at the fair all day yesterday, and you don't need to be a farmer from Iowa to know that an invasion in Ukraine that drives up the price of fertilizer has a direct impact right here. I talked to small business owners who were seeing competition coming from places like China that were destroying the business model that they had for a family's century been working on, being competed with, and land being purchased right here in our home state by the Chinese Communist government become a direct threat to whether they were going to get to hand that on to their next generation. Now, team, I'm privileged to get to serve in the U.S. military today. In fact, we just had my director of operations as flying a recon operation off the coast of China International Airspace. Repeatedly, though, he's been engaged by very aggressive flights by the CCP in J-16s that have tried to force the United States away from our allies in the region and to assert dominance in an area that is international standards and norms. We have young state troopers right here in Iowa who are going to the southern border to help defend our country because we know what comes from China ends up in Mexico and sadly ends up in every community in the form of fentanyl and deadly human trafficking. And we see far too often that what happens around the globe has a direct, not only economic impact, but a national security threat to those of us here in Iowa. And so I'm going to go with what I think is probably one of the most salient quotes here from a former president, President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, who says, "The surest guarantee of peace is a strong military, not to cause war, but to prevent war. The United States has a responsibility to be a leader in this space." And so I'm so thrilled that we get to invite up two incredible women who have been leaders in the Bastion Institute. First, I'd like to introduce our friend, Senator Joni Ernst. Now, Joni, as you know, is the first combat woman to serve in the United States Senate. She cut her teeth and dirtied her boots on the ground in the Middle East, running convoy transportation to be able to help keep young Iowa National Guards members not only safe, but to ensure that that conflict did not boil over and have a direct impact right here at home. The other leader who is serving with us is an incredibly accomplished governor, a woman who took on the challenge in South Carolina at a time when executive leadership was not only demanded, but required of her to go beyond her comfort zone. As an Indian American woman, she and her husband, who is a current serving military member, as you all know, just deployed to help defend our country in Central Command in North Africa, is now serving in the opportunity to lead potentially our country going forward with her great real-world experience as the ambassador at the United Nations at a time when America needed someone who not only would stand up to China, but was also directly across the table from hostile leaders in Iran that wanted to terrorize what was going on in Israel, and the precursor to what Russia has done over these last many years. So team, please welcome with me our U.S. Senator Joni Ernst and Ambassador Nikki Haley.
Thank you all. Welcome to the Bastion Institute. It's such an honor and a privilege to once again have with us Ambassador Nikki Haley, former governor of the great state of South Carolina. And folks, we are going to have a wonderful discussion today. And just as Zach said, and isn't Zach Nunn an incredible congressman for our state? So Zach, we appreciate your service today, serving in the United States House of Representatives in Congress, but we also truly appreciate your service in the Air Force and the Air National Guard. So thank you, Zach, for your service.
And Joni, I'll just add, and I don't just say this, y'all have a fantastic delegation. You really do.
Amen.
But man, I didn't think you could get any better. You add Zach Nunn in there, You guys are at the top of your game, truly. Y'all are so blessed. Really, really blessed.
Yes, we are. Thank you. I do really appreciate that, and we do have a fantastic delegation. And so not only here in Iowa do we focus on the issues that are so important to us domestically. If you think about economy, we talk about the southern border and try and find solutions where we can and how we can. But we also have our adversaries worldwide that continue to press upon the United States. And so today the ambassador and I are going to dive into some of those issues, and we'd love to hear your perspective, Ambassador. We know that you have spent time as a governor, and so you do have executive experience. But your time at the United Nations as well added a lot of color and experience to the landscape that we're facing today. I'd love to talk a little bit about where we are with China, because this seems to be, and it's not even the elephant in the room or the gorilla in the room. China is here. China is all around us. We see their influence globally with their Belt and Road Initiative. So when we talk about a pivot to the Indo-Pacific, you might hear that on the news every now and again. I would remind people that it's not just the region that we need to be concerned about. It's China in South America. It's China with a spy base in Cuba. It is China in our skies with spy balloons. So why don't we go ahead and just kick it off there, Ambassador, and talk about the threat that China poses in so many different ways, and then how should we be responding as the United States?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Joni for you having me, but more than that, thank you for having the Bastion Institute. I'm so thankful that you came. National security matters, and you have always been not just up front on national security, but in Congress, you're always talking about it. Now, why should we care? You know, when you've got $32 trillion in debt, when you've got a lack of transparency in the classroom, when you've got high crime, when you've got an open border, why should we care about national security? China is the perfect example, because right now when you look at the fact that we're $32 trillion in debt, guess what? China owns some of that debt. When you look at the fact that our kids are falling behind in education, guess what? China's making sure they're filling millions of dollars at our universities to steal our research and to make sure they spread Chinese propaganda. When you look at crime, guess what? 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese. So everybody panicked about the spy balloon. Just imagine all these mini spy balloons that are in our country. When you think about everything that's happening at the border, we lost 75,000 people last year to fentanyl. We had more fentanyl cross that border that would kill every single American last year. Number one cause of death for adults 18 to 49, fentanyl. Don't think for a second China doesn't know what they're doing when they send it over. So China is among us. What are some other things? They've bought 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently near Grand Forks Air Force Base. They bought, you know this, the largest pork producer in the country, right here in Iowa. And what are they doing to our farmers? Now, Iowans are at the top of their game when it comes to farm technology and agribusiness. And look at what they've done. They're stealing seeds. They're stealing the technology, because the one thing we need to remember, China is food insecure. So when they go start taking this, they're trying to figure out how they can steal what we have so that they don't need us. It's a national security issue, because we need to keep them from stealing it so that that's our leverage to keep them from doing more. You also look at the fact that They continue to lobby Congress. Chinese front companies continue to lobby Congress on behalf of the Communist Chinese Party. You've got the fact that they steal $600 billion worth of intellectual property from us every year. Go further and you look at the fact that that the FBI opens a new spy case on China every 10 hours. Every 10 hours, there's an espionage case that's opened up. This is all infiltration in our country. And that's not even getting into the military. Then we look at the military. My husband's deployed right now. We care about our military being the strongest and best force in the world. But right now, China has the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. They are building hypersonic missiles. We've barely gotten started. They're doing cyber. They're doing artificial intelligence. Everything that we're watching them do, they're doing it better. Then you go and you look, they are now the biggest developer of neurostrike weapons. Those are weapons that are engineered to disable brain activity, to use against military commanders and groups of the population. What more do we need to see to say China's not only threatening our country, China's in our country, and we're allowing it to happen? And so when that Chinese spy balloon went over and everybody suddenly felt China in our country, what did Biden do about it? He sent Blinken over there. Then he sent Yellen over there. Then he sent Kerry over there. The last thing you do is appease an enemy. The first thing you do is show strength to an enemy. So Janet Yellen says, this shouldn't be a winner-take-all scenario. We should play by the rules. We should see each other as competitors. China is laughing at us. I negotiated with China. Everything they do is a winner-take-all scenario. They've never played by the rules. They don't see us as a competitor. They see us as an enemy. We have to start doing something. The biggest thing that I lose sleep over when people ask me is the time it takes from now until we kick Joe Biden out of office. It's what happens in that time. That's what I lose sleep over.
Right, absolutely, and thank you for that, and the breadth of knowledge that you have on China, and it is directly related to your experience at the United Nations as well. And Ambassador, you also did serve as a governor, which was incredible. Bastion is focused on linking American strength abroad to the American people here at home, and why it's important that the United States exhibits strong leadership. So what did your time as the governor in South Carolina, what type of leadership did that bring to the table? As you're looking at the future of this country, what type of experience and leadership capabilities will you bring into your future ambitions?
Well, when I became governor, South Carolina was hurting. We had double-digit unemployment. We had thousands of people on welfare. South Carolina was the butt of the jokes, and we had to turn ourselves around. And so quickly, what we started doing was we turned South Carolina into an economic powerhouse. I didn't want to just take companies from other states. I wanted to make things in America again. I wanted us to be strong for the country, not just strong for South Carolina. So by the time I left, we were building planes with Boeing. We were building more BMWs than any place in the world. We brought in Mercedes-Benz. We brought in Volvo. We had 5 international tire companies. They were calling us the beast of the Southeast. We moved our unemployment from 11% to 4%. We announced jobs in every county. But South Carolina is a massive military state. And so the biggest focus that I had was, one, how do I make sure our military installations were strong? How did I make sure that we were doing everything we needed to make sure that our men and women who served were treated well? But that's where I got my focus a lot on our veterans. I mean, you look at our veterans right now, we were all raised by our parents that you take care of those who take care of you. but I'll ask you if we're taking care of those who take care of us. 33,000 veterans in our country are homeless. 1 in 3 suffer from PTSD or thoughts of suicide. We lose 22 heroes a day to suicide. Yet for a veteran to get a doctor's appointment, on average, 29 days. Why 29? Because on the 30th day, they get to go to the doctor or hospital of their choice. So midway through the 29 days, it's rescheduled and the clock starts all over again. That's shameful. It's shameful that we allow that to happen. We need to make sure that we focus on, and you know this, Joni, when you get deployed, when you come home, it's a blessed day. We love to be reunited with the ones we love. With Michael, we have started our year-long prayer. Year-long of, we want them to be strong and successful in their mission, and prayer that they come back home to us safe. But when they come back home, that's the easy part. The hard part's when we actually get home. When Michael came home from Afghanistan, he couldn't hear loud noises. He couldn't be in crowds. Life had passed him by for the year that he was gone. We can't just love our military when they're gone. We have to love them when they're home too. We have to help them through that transition. And so we need telehealth so that they can get real-time mental health care. We need them to be able to get doctors and hospitals of their choice. We need to make sure that we're constantly taking care of them. And so from a governor's aspect, we cut taxes for veterans. We made sure that we had training for veterans so that we could have more of them. Not only that, veterans make fantastic workers. And so we wanted to recruit veterans from other states, and we focused on that. But I think the biggest thing you learn as an executive is you have to keep your people safe. It's the biggest thing. You have to keep your people safe. You have to keep your economy strong. You have to take care of your small businesses because they're the heartbeat of your economy. And you have to lift up everybody, not just a select few, but everybody.
Yeah, thank you. I think we should all recognize that we do have to have a strong economy. We have to keep our nation strong. We need everyone engaging in the workforce. If we are a strong nation, then we can project strength. And we can do that in a number of ways. We can do it diplomatically, we can do it militarily, certainly economically as we engage in trade, which you said, bringing some of that technology, that industry from overseas into the state of South Carolina. You were making your state stronger is what we look to for the United States in the future to be successful. Engage in trade,
and now's
engage
the
in
time
economy.
We need to become less dependent on China.
Yes.
Let's start focusing on our friends, whether it's Japan, whether it's South Korea, whether it's India, whether it's Australia, going to the Philippines. Let's go to the Arab countries. We need to start really focusing on those alliances, making sure that China's been doing it. We're behind the gun on that. We need to start focusing on that as well.
Okay, so you just brought up a whole list of partners that we have around the globe. And again, I do believe in America first. I absolutely do. But I don't believe in America alone. I think this is where America really needs to learn at this point in time how we leverage those friendships, those alliances, those partnerships with other nations around the globe. Certainly, if we want to take care of our men and women in uniform and make sure that we're not deploying them everywhere around the globe, we have to have strong alliances or partnerships and encourage stability in other nations. So how would you engage other countries and maybe name some of those strong partners where you think we can place more upon their shoulders by being a good partner to them in order to create greater stability?
I think first we look at those countries who are feeling the threats of China as well. That is a logical place that we start, and that's why I talk about Japan and South Korea. That's why we talk about Australia. We need to really strengthen our ties with India because they recently took out $1 billion stimulus to become less dependent on China. Wouldn't it be nice if we started exporting, whether it's agricultural goods or anything else, to India as well, and make sure that we can get things from them? Right now, we shouldn't be going through the drugstore aisle and seeing that all the medicine is made in China. Guess who could help us with that? India. So we need to start focusing on that. Right now, you look at the fact that the Arab countries, they're starting to lean towards China. We need to pull that back because they are integral to our fight to hold back Iran. Iran says every day, death to America. If we can get those Arab countries with us solidified, that's a whole army that helps us do that. And then when you look at the situation with Russia and Ukraine, how does that relate to China? Because a win for Russia is a win for China. Remember when they held hands and named themselves unlimited partners before the Olympics? And then remember a couple of months ago when the Russian plane shot down the US drone and President Xi showed back up in Russia? They are doing this together. The new axis of evil is Russia, China, with Iran as their junior partner, and they're starting to pull North Korea in. America is best when we understand there's a difference between good and evil. And when you always look at it through a good and evil lens, that will dictate where you go forward. You look at Ukraine and Russia. Here you have a free country just like us, a democracy just like us, and a country went in and invaded. Why should we care about Ukraine? Because dictators tell you what they're going to do. They're actually really transparent. Russia said that they were going to, China said they were going to invade Hong Kong. We watched it. Russia said that they were going to invade Ukraine. That happened. China says Taiwan is next. We better believe them. Russia says when they're done with Poland and the Baltics, when they're done with Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. That would start a world war. We're trying to prevent war. That's why I always say strong militaries don't start wars, strong militaries prevent wars. And so when you look at how hard the Ukrainians have fought, they've destroyed 50% of the combat military and equipment that Russia has. Russia's hit rock bottom. They're getting drones from Iran. They're getting missiles from North Korea. They've raised the draft age to 65. The problem that we have is that Biden was slow to the take. Russia surrounded Ukraine a whole year before. We should have prevented this from ever starting. But what started it? What started it was Afghanistan. The idea that we left Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, look at what that told every one of our enemies. That's what gave Putin the green light. And since then, Biden's been slow. We need to finish this war. We need to stop it. Ukraine's not asking us to put troops on the ground. I don't think we need to give them cash. But let's give them the equipment and ammunition to win. They've proven that they are strong fighters. Let's help them finish this and send Russia back to where they need to be because China's watching every bit of it. They watched every company that left Russia. They've watched every country that's helped Ukraine. And if Ukraine wins this, it'll send the biggest message to China about invading Taiwan.
Yes, and yes.
And I would love to ask you, because I think they would want to know, from Congress's perspective, how do you see China and how do you see the Russian-Ukrainian war, and what do you think Congress's role is going to be going forward?
Well, number one, I'm going to agree with you that we had weak leadership coming out of the Biden administration, and we saw this play out in that first year of his presidency with the fall of Afghanistan. That started this whole domino effect that we see around the globe. I see it directly related to President Joe Biden and his failure as commander-in-chief. And it is August. folks, this always weighs heavy on my heart. As we approach the end of the month, we had the fall of Afghanistan. And Ambassador, we had a young Iowa native that was killed at Abbey Gate. And we continue to honor him to this day. But Corporal Dagan William Tyler Page from Montgomery County, Iowa, he graduated from a Nebraska high school just over the river from us, but his mother and I grew up together in Montgomery County. I'm very close with his grandparents. But we lost him at Abbey Gate because of the failures of this administration. And when there are dictators, there are adversaries around the globe that see a weak-kneed leader, they will take advantage. So Russia saw what happened in Afghanistan. China was paying attention to what happened in Afghanistan, where this administration called it a great success. We all know that's not the case. And we have the human casualties to show that it is not the case. It was not a great success. So in Congress, we continue to work on the China issue, and it is very difficult. I serve in the minority in the United States Senate, and really trying to impress upon the majority party that we have to be aggressive when it comes to China. We have to pay attention to their intentions and know and understand that they are literally surrounding us. You mentioned the fentanyl that is coming into the country. So I finally did have a really good partner in a Democrat that was willing to step forward and say, you know what, we've got to fight the fentanyl crisis. And that was Tim Kaine out of Virginia. So he came together with me, and we actually worked on a bill in Congress, and it was included in our National Defense Authorization Act that would allow our military to partner with the Mexican authorities and the Mexican military to push back against the Mexican cartels. First step. That's the first step. But you won't hear the Democrats talking about it loudly because they don't want to point out the leadership failures of this administration, one, when it comes to China, and two, when it comes to securing our southern border and the threat that it poses to every community across the United States of America. So we have this great failure of leadership, and you've just so eloquently pointed out how this administration has been sending top officials to China, not to say, shame on you, China, cut it out, or we're coming after you. Instead, he has sent them to go literally, in all sense of the word, bow down to China. Whether it's on climate, whether it's on trade, and certainly when it's on the military. So there are a number of efforts we do have in Congress to push back against China. We, as Republicans, are very focused on it. We do see some of the Democrats that are coming our direction. We love the bipartisanship in this area. That's incredibly important to have a united front as we confront the world's dictators. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity to represent Iowa in the United States Congress, in the Senate, and be able to push back against those adversaries. So this is an opportunity, folks, for us to stand strong, but we must have a leader, a commander-in-chief that is willing to stand strong.
You know, and I think what's really important is we have more threats surrounding us than we've had in a long time. And when you look at the next president, you have to have someone who has negotiated with them. You have to have someone that knows exactly how they are, how they act, how they try and pull one over on you, and you have to be able to go forward. I look now at what happened yesterday, and we see that Biden is going and basically releasing $6 billion to Iran. Now, I will tell you, when I was at the UN, I took a big interest in Americans who were, in prison in other countries. And we helped in a big way with their families and everything else, trying to get them home. The Namazis were one of the families I worked very closely with. I'm very happy for that family that they're going to get some relief. I'm very sad for America, because what you just did was you put every American in danger now. Because if they know they can get $6 billion, which the last time they got money, they got $1.7 billion. Now they've gotten $6 billion. You just raised the ante on what they can get for an American. $6 billion can infiltrate a lot of terrorism. They can do a lot with the Houthis in Yemen. They can do a lot with Hezbollah in Lebanon that threatens Israel. They can do a lot sending Iranians, which they have said the easiest way for an Iranian to get to America is through the southern border. They can do a lot with Hamas. And now you just gave them $6 billion to again further their terrorism and put more Americans in danger, because now all of a sudden Americans have to be even more careful overseas, because the amount of money that we're willing to give just went up. It's the wrong approach. It's the complete wrong approach that you do when you're trying to show strength in the world.
Absolutely, Ambassador. And we know that Americans already have a target on their back when they are engaging overseas, whether it is China, whether it is Iran, you name any of those terrorist proxy organizations that are funded by Iran. We have just handed over, as you said, really the bankroll for these terrorist proxies.
We have Islamic terrorism has actually been a huge issue in Africa. So Joni mentioned that my husband is deployed. He's there in Djibouti. Why are we there? We're there because we've got 18,000 Americans stuck in Sudan. We're there because now you just had this coup happen in Niger, and you're seeing all of that, and we've got Americans there and an embassy situation there. We used to have 3 terrorist groups in Africa. We now have 10 terrorist groups in Africa. And then where my husband is stationed, the only Chinese military base offshore is 3 miles away from where he is. So even though you don't hear about Africa, the Iranian influence in Africa, the Chinese influence in Africa is strong. And our goal, obviously, that our military wants is to keep it there and not let it come here. But the problem is that Islamic infiltration and terrorism just got a lot stronger today. It just put more of our military in danger by doing that.
Yeah, wow. So we could go on and on about some of the threats emanating from who we call the Big Four: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. So again, I'm going to take us back and leveraging friends and allies, and because we do have the great Iowa State Fair going on, I'm going to take a little different avenue. We all know that nothing compares to the Iowa State Fair, but really this is a wonderful opportunity for Iowa to showcase agriculture. And through agriculture, we do engage with so many different nations around the globe, whether it is the export of our soybeans, our corn, our pork, you name it. Iowa is really to the top of the states when it comes to ag exports around the globe. And we're highlighting a lot of that over at the Iowa State Fair in the next 10 days. We saw in the last administration with President Trump, he had negotiated with his trade reps the USMCA, the United States, Mexico, and Canada trade agreement, which was very beneficial for our farmers here in the great state of Iowa. However, right now in this administration, we see no movement on trade agreements that would benefit our ag sector, our manufacturing sector. And I've always believed that if you have good trade partners, it does help with stability and you become better partners in other areas. So unlike China, and that's kind of an outlier, but typically if we're engaging in trade with nations perhaps in Africa, if we're engaging in with nations in Southeast Asia, where there are a lot of terrorist proxy organizations, that typically those trade partners do a lot better in really taking on our interests as well and really taking care of some of those threats within their own borders. Can you talk a little bit about why economy and the global scale of our economy and our trade is so important?
First of all, Iowa is a very important state. And as much as the media wants to say it's because it's the first caucus in a presidential election, yes, that's important. But Iowa is important because food security is national security. And so when you look at our agriculture, I'm from an agricultural state in South Carolina. It is why I put such a heavy weight on our farmers and our agricultural community, because never underestimate the power of that food security situation. Don't take it for granted and don't underestimate the leverage. The thing that our president should be doing is no different than what I did in South Carolina. I was constantly selling our businesses, constantly working on deals, constantly doing things that would empower our economy. That should be the same role as a president. A president should be doing export deals with other countries that help your businesses. Our agriculture, it is part of the role of the president to sell it to other countries. Our manufacturing, it's the role of the president to go and leverage that and use that with other countries. That is what a president does. A president doesn't just defend America. The president promotes America and all of the business that's there. And that's the part that's been missing. When you see our economy and you see inflation, the first thing you do is you kick it into high gear and you say, let's start selling. Let's start selling everything and export all the goods that we have to other countries that we can do that to. It's a huge business opportunity. And that's what we need to be focused on. And it's a shame you're not hearing anything about trade deals from the Biden administration.
Nothing at all. And I know a number of my colleagues in the United States Senate are very frustrated about this as well, because there are so many opportunities that are left hanging out there, whether it is opportunity in the Philippines or additional opportunity with Vietnam, if it's opportunity in Africa. There are so many markets that we could be tapping into, and yet every time we call and have discussions with U.S. Trade Rep Catherine Tai, it's always the same answer. I have never gotten a different answer. It's always, well, we'll see. We'll look into that. And then no response, nothing further after that. So again, I think this is an area where the United States is really failing on promoting our American workers and the goods and services, the products that we can develop here in the United States, and just enriching their lives by having those different markets to sell to. I think that's incredibly important. I'm going to back up a little bit, Nikki, and I'm going to call you Nikki right now because
we're friends.
Because we talk a lot offline, and it's not just about politics and it's not just national security, but we talk about our families as well. And you have mentioned, and I know Zach mentioned, and we've been talking a lot about your husband, Michael, and the role that he is serving in right now. And we are so grateful to him for his service. But if you could talk a little bit about what he is doing right now and why it matters. You touched upon that, but I would love it if you would share just with our audience today how important that is and to understand service. In Iowa, we do have a large percentage of veterans that live in our communities, come from the cornfields to the battlefields. And we have a lot of tried and true members, whether they're National Guardsmen, whether they're reservists, or those that are serving on active duty in other locations. So if you could talk about Michael and his service in North Africa and what that means to our nation.
You know, I dropped him off 2 months ago at 4 a.m. and watched him and 230 soldiers pick up their 2 duffel bags of belongings and load a bus to go to a country they've never been, all in the name of defending and protecting America. I wish everybody could have seen that. It's the most humbling thing you will ever see. The fact that they're willing to sacrifice their lives and their families because they still believe in this amazing experiment that is America. And so when I look at not just the service members, but their families all across this country that sacrifice, that's what we need to remember, because that's what makes America exceptional. We still love our country that much, that freedom matters, that making sure that we are a free country matters. And I think that, when they are now going, and like I said, they're in Africa, a lot of times these military men and women, they go to these countries and Americans don't know that there's even a threat there. You wouldn't know why he was there in Africa. It's actually they're up to their eyeballs in what's happening right now. And the fact that they are trying to manage the situation there so that we don't manage it here does matter. And I think when we hear about, why are we sending military or why are we doing this? It does matter. America is not free on its own. We sit on the shoulders of so many men and women who served and sacrificed their lives so that we could live the life that we live. And unfortunately, we're always going to have our military families sacrifice. What bothers me is our recruitment is down 25%. And when you look at recruits that go into the military, 80% of them come from military families. And for the first time, veterans or military members are telling their kids, don't do it. Why are they telling them not to do it? Is it the way we treat our veterans? Is it the fact that we are not paying attention to what we need to be doing to keep America strong? Is it this national self-loathing that's taken over our country where they say America's bad or rotten or racist? Is it the fact that they worry that military and military families are going to be used as pawns in a budget situation in Congress? Or is it the fact that we don't see them as heroes anymore? Whatever it is, that should worry every single one of us. Someone asked me the other day if I would be willing to institute a draft. God help us if it ever gets to that point. Because the reason my husband got in, he got in after 9/11. He got in because my brother was a veteran and he fought in Desert Storm, and he watched that sacrifice. He loved that patriotism. He loved the fact that it was everybody doing it to take care of their neighbors. I don't ever want us to lose that. As much as my heart falls every time he deploys, I'm so proud. We should all be so proud that we live in a country where that sacrifice and that service matters, because every enemy hates that. Russia right now, where they're pulling people off the streets of Russia and handing them a shovel to fight with, they hate that. China, that's looking at the fact that they have to dictate what their military do, that the passion isn't there, they hate that. The idea that Iran knows that if we go to war, the world knows if our military steps up, you better watch out. But I worry because we see at the Department of Defense now, the one most demoralizing thing we're doing to our military, why are we making them take gender pronoun classes? Why do you do that? Why are we going and creating all of these distractions? We need them to be a strong force. We need to be modernizing our equipment, modernizing our military. You'll appreciate this. We are just now coming out with the first modernized handgun for our military in decades. Why do our military have old equipment? Shouldn't we have the best equipment? And it's not throwing money at the Department of Defense. They're fat, they're bloated, they're bureaucratic, and they waste. Let's pull down that bureaucracy. Let's pull down that red tape, and let's make sure it's going to those military men and women to have what they need. Let's be strong in cyber. Let's be strong in artificial intelligence. These aren't wars on land, air, sea anymore. We have to look at it as cyber, artificial intelligence, and space. Those are all things that matter. So when I think about the military, what I hope and what I am committed to doing as president is people are going to want to serve again. They're going to love their country again. They're going to know that this is for the good of their kids and their grandkids. And we're going to be strong and proud again because our kids deserve that. They deserve to know what we felt when we were growing up. They deserve to know that kind of patriotism. We need our kids to be saying the Pledge of Allegiance when they start school every day. That shouldn't even be up for debate. We need our kids to love America. And I know that we'll continue to do that. But God bless our military and the veterans that served before them, because that's what makes America strong.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much. And thanks to Michael as well for his service. We truly do appreciate it. And I know that so many people will come up and thank me for my service. I know for Zach, they say thank you for your service. And when folks say thank you for your service, I always like to say back, you're worth it. You're worth it.
And thank your daughter for her service.
Yeah, thank you. So, yes, and my daughter is serving active duty Army. She's in Georgia. She is stationed in Georgia. She's a supply officer. And I know that America is worth it. Our people are worth it. And even on discouraging days, because believe me, I see the best and the worst, I think, of society all across the United States. But I have to remind myself at times that we still live in the greatest nation on the face of the planet. Every last one of you, you are worth it. You are worth our service. You are worth our sacrifice. But what we have to do is ensure that we have the leadership that will continue to lead us in a direction that makes our country always worth serving and sacrificing for. And you mentioned the struggle to recruit members into the military. I think some of our younger people wonder if our nation is worth serving and sacrificing for. And as they are exiting the school system, they should never have a doubt in their mind that we live in such an incredible country. Never in a million years should they ever question the opportunities that this country has to offer them. So I just thank you so much for having been such a great leader for the state of South Carolina, but then also your leadership at the United Nations, because most certainly the countries that engaged with you at the United Nations, they never doubted the strength here in the United States of America. You were the front for that. So we thank you very much for your service as well to our great United States of America.
We took the kick me sign off of our backs when I was at the UN, and it was really because we told those countries, I went in wanting those countries to know what America was for and what America was against. I didn't care if they didn't like me, but I wanted them to respect America. And I think that's what we have to do going forward. And when we talk about America and whether these kids love America or whether they think it's worth it, we all have a role to play there. America doesn't stay free on her own. America doesn't stay great on her own. And if there was any reminder of that, look at the past few years and how far we've fallen. But that's why this next election matters so much, because it's going to take courage from every single one of us. Courage for me to run, and courage for every one of you to know, don't complain about what you get in a general if you don't play in this caucus. It matters. It really does matter.
It does matter. It does matter. And you've mentioned strength. You also brought up the word respect. I think that's incredibly important, because while there may be many countries around the globe that don't see eye to eye with us as a republic, but they certainly can respect us and respect our strength. And that is all key to deterring those adversaries, is if they know that we are strong, if we have good leadership that does not falter, if they respect us. So deterrence should be the goal, right? Deterrence should be the goal. We don't ever want to have to send our men and women into a military conflict. We don't want that. What we want is to have a stable world. We want to deter our adversaries, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. So where should President Biden be focusing his efforts in order to deter our adversaries around the globe? Or what would Nikki Haley do to deter those adversaries?
Well, and I think that, again, it's all about preventing war. That should be, I don't want to have to send my husband to fight anywhere. So the goal is always to prevent war. And you do that through strength. But I'll give you an example of something we shouldn't be doing. Last year, we gave $50 billion in foreign aid. Do you know who we gave it to? Pakistan, that harbored terrorists that tried to kill our soldiers. Iraq, that has Iranian influence that says death to America. Zimbabwe, the most anti-American African country there is. We gave money to Belarus, who's holding hands with Russia as they invade Ukraine. We gave money to communist Cuba, who we named a state sponsor of terrorism, who's now building a spy base in Cuba. And you mark my words, the Chinese military, who they're building it with, wait until they put Chinese military there. We can't have that happen. And the one that makes me sick to my stomach, we give money to China. How weak do we look? When I am president, we will no longer give money to countries that hate America. You should never do that. So the first thing you do is put your resources with those who think like you, who are gonna be like you. I personally don't think you give cash to any country. I think you always give durables. So in Ukraine, let's give equipment, give ammunition, but don't give cash because we want to know how it's being spent, and American people deserve that. But stop, it's funny when I was at the UN and we moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The entire world condemned us, and I was proud to stand up to the entire world on that because we were acknowledging a truth. That Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and we always put our embassies in the capital, and that was acknowledging a truth, but I was upset. So when I went back to my office, I told my staff, I said, I want you to put a book together, and I want you to list all 193 countries. I want the second column to be the percentage of times they voted with the U.S. and against the U.S., and I want the third column to be how much foreign aid we gave them. And I took that book and I gave it to President Trump. He lost his mind. He's flipping pages, he's yelling out countries. And I said, I'm not saying you give foreign aid based on a percentage vote at the UN, but that should be one of the things we look at. Quit trying to buy friends. Quit paying off enemies. We need to be strategic again. That's the biggest part about strength. When you talk about deterrence, when you talk about preventing war, you have to have a strategy. There's a serious problem when we've had multiple presidents come in, started with Obama. They come in and they pass executive orders, right? Executive orders, and they get things done. So Obama did that across the board. Then Trump came in and he reversed all of those executive orders and put his own. Then Biden came in and he reversed those and put in his own. When you do that, you're showing every country it's just a matter of time. They can wait out the next president. Wait out the next president.
Did you almost say buy out the next president? Sorry.
It feels
There's
like
a lot in the news
it feels
today.
Like that. Yes. But the thing that's really important is, as president, I'm going to make sure we have a plan for 20, 30 years out. Not even the 8 years that I'm president. Let's start having a military plan 20, 30, 40 years out. Let's have an economic plan that's 20, 30, 40 years out. Does that mean you go through Congress to get it done? Yes, we will go through Congress to get it done. But guess what? When it's permanent, that's when people trust you. That's when countries see that you've got everything going. That sends a really big message when we show government is working. And that is the biggest thing we could do with national security, and it's the biggest thing we could do with prevention and deterrence as we go forward. When you have a plan for our military and they suddenly see we're focused on cyber, we're focused on building making sure that we do have enough ships, that we continue. The one thing we do get right is with our submarines, that we continue to have all of that. Those are the things that really send the biggest message to other countries to not mess with us.
Yes, and I appreciate that perspective. As some of you probably noticed, I was sitting here smiling, and it's not because I think this is a humorous topic. I am just so glad to see the enthusiasm from someone when it comes to our national security and actually going after our adversaries. You brought up the point that we send American taxpayer dollars to countries that hate us. Why do we do that? Why do we continue to do that? Especially to China. That should not be happening. So I think that gives us a lot to think about as we move forward, and we do have to be very strategic with taxpayer dollars and making sure that when we are engaging in foreign support, that it makes sense for the best interests of the United States of America. So I really appreciate your service at the United Nations and enabling the Trump administration to take a look at that and really think about that. One thing that has been mentioned a couple times, we have mentioned fentanyl and how this is affecting the United States of America. And this administration has severely neglected our southern border. They won't mention it. I just stated how it's really like pulling teeth to get Democrats in Congress to really understand the issue or even come forward and criticize President Biden on the lack of action at the southern border. And yet, right here in Iowa, I had a sheriff just 2 days ago during one of my stops that had said, we're seeing it in our little rural community. This is right here in Iowa, folks. While methamphetamine remains the #1 illicit drug of choice in the state of Iowa, and over 90% of that comes up from Mexico already, what we are seeing now is the advent of fentanyl, even in our most rural communities. Matter of fact, the sheriff said, we're seeing methamphetamine laced with fentanyl.
Yep.
So it really is an issue, and it is a national security issue. So, Nikki, how would you address what we see happening at the southern border, the crisis that it is?
I went to the southern border, and I didn't do the photo op and leave. I went 400 miles down that border. Y'all aren't ready for what I saw. Mounds of clothes, mounds of shoes, paraphernalia, rape areas that the women and girls have to walk through. When you get up in the morning, you get your coffee and you watch the news. When these ranchers get up in the morning, they get their coffee and they go see if anyone died crossing the fence. They pick up whatever little kids were left behind and they turn them over to Border Patrol. I met with multiple sheriffs. They said before 7 a.m., they try and capture as many illegal immigrants as they can. They turn them over to Border Patrol. Border Patrol documents them and releases them until their court date years from now. And when I asked Border Patrol about their job, they said, you want to know what we do? We're glorified babysitters. They don't let us do our job. 5.5 million illegal immigrants have crossed that border. I have always said, we are a country of laws. The second we stop being a country of laws, we give up everything this country was founded on. So how do we fix it? The way I would fix it is, first of all, acknowledge that it's a problem. We have to make sure that we go defund sanctuary cities once and for all. That's been a real trigger for us, and as long as they know that's there, that's going to be a problem. Let's go back to the Remain in Mexico policy, because nobody wants to wait in Mexico. Let's make sure that that happens. Instead of catch and release, let's go to catch and deport, so that everybody has to go back. We can't keep holding on to these people there. Instead of 87,000 IRS agents going after Middle America, let's have 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. When we start to focus on those types of things, that's when we'll start to get the border back on track. We have to secure it. And by the way, it's not just the southern border, it's the northern border. We are finding every state now is now a state that's having to deal with this. And you look at the mayor in New York City, suddenly he's up in arms about what's happening because he's feeling it for the first time. You have to hand it to Governor Abbott for putting that barrier there. His job is to protect the people of his state. He needed to do that because President Biden wasn't doing anything. We have to start doing that. And the one thing I know, when I was at the United Nations, you remember Trump had a real bad border issue. And when that faced him and he was dealing with it, I was on the ground in Guatemala and Honduras. And that's when all of them, that's really where we were getting Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And what we saw is the reason they were coming is because they were having problems with gangs, they were having problems with drugs, and they were having problems with trafficking. And so we went and talked to the leadership there, and we said, okay, and we sent our military trained to help them deal with the gangs. We put intelligence boats on the water to help them deal with the drug issue. But we said, we will do this, but you have to stop sending them. They have to apply from there. And if you remember, all that flow stopped. That's what happened. And President Trump made sure that that was followed and they listened to it. So go to the heart of why are they coming in the first place? When Biden got elected, we knew we were in trouble when you had all those immigrants show up with the Biden t-shirts. And the worst part is the people that are bringing them, they are trafficking people, they're trafficking drugs, and they're getting paid big dollars to do it. And so if we were to say no more, this isn't going to happen, if we put barriers up like what Abbott's doing, or you put a wall up so that they see they can't come, they will stop coming. They're only coming because they can. We have to make sure that it's very clear we're not going to allow any more people coming in unless you've done it the right way.
Yeah, amen to that, because we really do have to go back to different policies. We have seen certain policies that have worked in the past, just as the Remain in Mexico. Unfortunately, we don't have a leader in this country with the intestinal fortitude to do anything about our southern border. And you mentioned Governor Abbott in Texas, and he is desperately trying to do the right thing for his constituents. There are many governors that are engaging and assisting Governor Abbott. Governor Kim Reynolds here in the state of Iowa is one of those governors, where we do have a number of Iowa Guard troops that are deploying to our southern border along Texas. This is for Operation Lone Star. So, we wish them Godspeed as they are engaging in this crisis. But to your point that we have these migrants that are coming into many communities throughout the United States, and with them, we see the flow of fentanyl as well. And as I stated earlier, we are seeing that here in the state of Iowa. So that's why we do have our own soldiers that are deploying forward to help in this battle right here at home.
And, I would be interested to talk to the military that has been sent there, because I can tell you a few years ago when they were doing that, my husband had military members, friends that went and served on the border. And the most frustrating part for them is when they would work the border, they were given a clicker. They couldn't detain anyone that came across. But when they'd come across, all they did was click to let them know that another one crossed the border. And so I would love to know what our military is doing on the border and whether they're actually letting them detain, or are you just counting how many are breaking the law? That's the problem with that situation.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. And I've spoken to a number of the Texas National Guardsmen. When I was at the border with Senators John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, we were able to go out and visit with those young men and women, and they were spotters. And their job was simply to identify those that were illegally crossing the border and report them to Border Patrol. That was their job. And we have to do better. We have to do better. And I know that they felt very helpless in that situation. Folks, as we're winding up our conversation today, I just want to remind you a little bit about the Bastion Institute and why I engage in this organization. And my mission, as I've been traveling across the great state of Iowa and across our United States, is just to help the American people understand how significant and important it is that America remain engaged on the world stage. If we are able to project power with strength, with respect, with leadership here in the United States, our enemies abroad are less likely to come knocking at our door. And so I want us to remain engaged, and it doesn't have to be always militarily. It shouldn't be militarily. But what we can do is engage diplomatically. We can continue to engage. These are the soft powers that you're very aware of. Engage diplomatically, engage through information and technology, and engage economically through trade and other agreements. We can remain strong, and we can protect ourselves and our interest by remaining engaged. If we simply pretend as the United States of America that the rest of the world doesn't exist, we will face consequences. And we need to protect our people, both here at home and abroad. In the time that we have left, Nikki, I would love to hear your thoughts on why we need new American leadership, what that means to you and what it means to America.
We look so distracted right now. And when America's distracted, the world is less safe. And we're seeing that play out. And I think that we have to really look at all the troubles that face us domestically and from a national security standpoint and say, this is our moment to right the ship. You know, someone asked me why I was running, and I said, you know, my parents came here 50 years ago to an America that was strong and proud and full of opportunities. I want them to know that America again. I'm doing this for my husband, Michael, and his military brothers and sisters because they need to know their sacrifice matters, that we do love our country. I'm doing this for our daughter who just got married, and I saw how hard it was for her and her husband to buy a home. And I'm doing this for my son because I know as a senior in college, it is really hard for them to have to write a paper when they know that the only way they can write it is to say something they don't believe just to get an A. That's not us. That's not America. And for the first time, 78% of Americans don't think that our kids are going to live as good of a life as we did. We can't be okay with that. We have a country to save. But I know we can do this. We've done it before. America has an amazing ability to self-correct. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to know where up is, and we're there. But it also means we've got to look at some hard truths. Republicans have lost the last 7 out of 8 popular votes for president. That's nothing to be proud of. We should want to win the majority of Americans. But to do that, we're going to have a new generational leader. We're going to have to be able to leave the negativity and the chaos behind us. We've got to say, it's time. It's time to move forward. And I think America will be ready. I think we see it. I think we feel it. But we owe it to our kids and our grandkids to do that. And so get used to this face. We have done, I think, over 40 events in Iowa. We're going to keep on doing them. We're headed to the Iowa State Fair. I will be handing out pork on a stick with you tomorrow. We'll be sitting next with the butter cow. We'll be, doing a fireside chat with Kim. We're going to be doing all these things, but it's because it matters. All of this does matter. So what I'll tell you is don't listen to the media. The media is going to do what the media does. Listen to your heart. Listen to your gut. Listen to your patriotism as an American. And be a part of something. If you've liked what I've had to say today, go tell 10 people. tell them to go to nikkihaley.com. Tell them to become a part of what we're doing with this movement. If you don't like what I've had to say today, shh. Just don't tell anyone you were here. But I just want to thank you for taking the time. Thank you for engaging in this conversation. We have a country to save, but I have no doubt that we will save her. I have faith.
And you are worth it. So I want to thank you, Ambassador Haley, for being here today. Nikki, you're always so gracious with your time. Your thoughts are so appreciated as we just engage the American public from your platform, from my platform in the Senate. It is incredibly important. We have a country that is worth it. I believe that. So my thanks, of course, to the Bastion Institute, to Hoof Cooksey, our executive director. I do have a board member that is with us here today, Colonel Dave Trotter, Iowa native, retired Army, and fellow Iowa State Army ROTC Cyclone Battalion member.
God bless you. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you very much, Dave, for your guidance and inspiration as we go through the Bastion Institute as well. And thank you all so much for engaging in these discussions, for listening, and for being incredible patriots. You are worth it. Thank you so much for your time today. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you.